Hey everyone, my name is Tara, and today I'm going to talk to you about managing anxiety and self doubt in early adulthood. Early adulthood is a time of growth, but it's also a time of pressure. Many people in this stage of life are balancing multiple roles and responsibilities, which leads to anxiety and self doubt. One of the most important things to remember is you are not alone in feeling this way. But to understand why this happens to people like us, we have to look at how our mindset affects our lives. Mindset affects every major area of our lives, especially family, career, and relationships. In my family life, I have noticed that I have less patience. I'm not always emotionally available, and I often feel guilt after my reactions. After long, stressful days at work, I feel overwhelmed, and that shows me and shows how I respond to my husband and my daughter. Even when I did not intend for it to, my tone, my reactions, and my energy reflect that stress. In my career, I always feel pressure to perform. There was always something else to do, something to improve on, something to fix. Even when I was doing well, I never feel like enough. This created a cycle of stress, burnout, self doubt, and withdrawal. In my relationships, I found myself constantly overthinking conversations. I always replay what I said, question how the other person interpreted it, and wondered if I'm doing enough or if I am enough for the friendship. Over time, this kind of thinking has caused me to pull back or become more irritable, even when I don't realize it is happening in that moment. Before I started working on my mindset and recognizing what was going on, I didn't realize how much it was affecting every part of my life. In my family life, I would snap easily to my husband and my daughter. I would be mentally distracted. I have big reactions over small situations. I was physically there, but I was not always emotionally present. In my career, I felt constant stress and pressure. Wasn't doing enough. I was irritable. I was irritable towards my students, towards my coworkers. In my relationships and friendships, I was always overthinking. Pull away emotionally, and I had a much lower tolerance for stress. Looking back, I can see that I wasn't just overwhelmed. I was stuck in this pattern of thinking, and that pattern of thinking was influencing my behavior in every area of my life and those around me. This process has really forced me to be honest with myself in a way that I have not allowed myself to be before. I realized that I am extremely self critical. I expect perfection from myself in every role. I expect to be the perfect mom, the perfect wife, the perfect teacher. Obviously, I cannot meet those expectations. And when I don't feel like I'm meeting them, my thoughts quickly turn dark and negative. I also notice that my thinking turns into overthinking. I always see the multiple possibilities and outcomes, the what if situations. I don't just think through these situations, I overanalyze them. I think about them for hours of one conversation, one look from another person, one what if this happens, this could all go wrong. Instead of landing on a balanced perspective, it's always worst case scenario. There is no in between. Another realization for me was that my mindset doesn't just affect me. And this is the hardest one for me to accept. It affects everyone around me. When I'm overwhelmed or stuck in my negative thinking, I'm less patient, less present, and less emotionally available. I don't show up for the people around me the way that I intend to, the way that I want to, because I'm stuck in my own head. The biggest shift for me was becoming aware of these patterns. I used to think I needed to completely fix my thinking, change it, take the negative thoughts, and never have them again. But I stopped and I reflected, and I learned that the awareness is the first and most important step towards change. Once I became aware of my patterns, I knew I needed practical ways to manage them, as this was a very daunting task for me. The first thing I worked on was reframing my thoughts. I tried to not immediately think, what if something goes wrong? I started to pause and ask myself, what's realistic in this situation? What can I control? This is what helped me shift away from worst case thinking towards a more balanced thinking and calmed my brain down. I also started tracking my negative thoughts using a really simple system with tick marks. I kept a small note in my phone or at my desk at work, and every time I noticed a negative or anxious thought, I would add a quick tick mark. It didn't take much time, but it forced me to actually notice when those thoughts were happening instead of letting them pass automatically. It's also a great visual reminder of how many negative thoughts I had throughout the workday versus how many negative thoughts I had when I was at home. And the results were very, very interesting. At first, it was overwhelming. I didn't realize how frequent those thoughts were coming. Over time, it helped me because I started to notice the patterns. And I noticed that even after a long day at work with so many tick marks from work, I would come home and have even more. My stress showed up at home after the long days, and certain situations would trigger the same types of thoughts. This awareness gave me something I didn't have before. It gave me control, which is something that I have always wanted. Instead of feeling like my thoughts were random or uncontrollable or worst case scenario, I could start to predict when they might happen and then be more intentional in how I responded to them. Another strategy that worked really well for me was learning to pause. I have a tendency to react immediately. Pausing gives myself an opportunity to stop and think. Even just a few seconds created space between my thoughts and my actions. It helped me respond more intentionally instead of emotionally. It helped me see what was really happening and how to process that information before reacting and overreacting. Finally, I focused on resetting. I'm choosing how I want to respond instead of letting my emotions take over. This is very important, as the emotional responses are what was taking me down that rabbit hole of what if, worst case scenarios. I realized through all of this that I don't need to eliminate negative thoughts completely. I don't think that's realistic. That's something that I will never achieve. But I need to get better at recognizing them and choosing how I respond to them and how I change my life. As I became more aware of these thoughts and the tick marks started increasing, I started to notice small but meaningful changes after doing the strategies that I tried. In my family life, after stopping, pausing, and reframing my thinking, I became more patient. I was more present and I was more understanding. I wasn't reacting as quickly or as strongly in those super stressful moments. And I was intentional about how I responded to my husband and my daughter. I was calmer. I was more there. I found myself being in the moment other than being distracted by what if this happens? What if that happens? And starting to spiral. In my career, I felt more confident, more balanced. I wasn't putting as much pressure on myself to be perfect, but I was able to better recognize what I was doing well instead of only focusing on what I needed to improve. This shift helped me handle stress more effectively and feel less overwhelmed. The confidence to know that I am doing what I am supposed to be doing and I am good at what I am doing is going to take time to come back, but I am gaining that confidence after reflecting and reframing my thoughts. What's important to me in my relationships is where I became much better at catching those thoughts and redirecting them. I became more emotionally aware and more intentional about how I communicated and showed up for others. I still have moments of thought of, was I enough in this conversation? But they are improving since my new mindset has changed. I am making progress. Progress can become a real difference, and it has been a real difference in my life so far. I feel different, and I know I've noticed a change in how I show up through different things in my life. What really changed my perspective on this whole topic was seeing the same pattern in someone else. I had the opportunity this year to work with a student who helped me see this in a completely different way. She was confident in the classroom, but she struggled socially. During structured activities, she knew what to expect. She felt successful. But during unstructured time like recess, she felt pressure, fear of judgment, and often chose to just stay alone. What stood out to me was that she wasn't incapable. She just did not have the confidence to do what she wanted to do. To support her, I was very intentional about the strategies that I used. First, I provided structured support for her. Instead of expecting her to jump into large group interactions, I created smaller, more predictable opportunities. We would play games, we would have conversations, we would have clear rules on expectations. It would help her join one or two peers at a time and clearly explain what the activity would look like so it didn't feel overwhelming to her. We also practiced social skills together. We worked through simple but important things like what to say when joining a group, how to start a conversation, and what to do if she felt unsure or pressured. Sometimes we would role play these situations so she could practice in a safe and supportive environment before trying them in real life. We started off with just me and her and ended up bringing in a couple of her safe peers that she felt very confident with to help practice these things for her to then take to the playground with kids that she does not know very well. We also focused on creating a more positive environment. I intentionally recognized and reinforced students in my classroom or who I saw around in the hallways or on the playground who were kind, inclusive, and supportive without being asked. Over time, this helped create a classroom culture where everyone was more accepting and my student felt safer and was willing to participate in more things with her peers. I made sure to give her encouragement that was specific and meaningful, not just good job, but I would point out exactly what she did well so she could see her own progress. For example, when we came inside from recess, I would pull her to the side and be like, I am so proud of you for playing that game of tag with your friends. That was a new friend on the playground. Do you want to tell me about them? And if she wanted to, she would sit and tell me about the rules of the game, how she interacted with them, and how she felt afterwards, especially if it was a positive reaction. I gave her time. I did not expect immediate change. We focused on small steps and consistent support, and we did see growth. Before, she stayed by herself. She avoided peer interaction. She felt overwhelmed and she felt judged and pressured. But now, after working with her throughout this entire school year, she has begun joining groups. She tries new things, she tries to play with new people, and she uses the strategies we practiced on her own. She even started finding certain peers on the playground that she felt comfortable to play with, regardless of who they were already playing with. This was a big, big step for her. She wasn't all of a sudden confident, but she was willing to try in the right situation. That's what stood out to me the most. She was willing to try. You cannot grow if you are not willing to try. And she did. I realized quickly that her struggle and my struggle were more similar than I first thought, and I saw a lot of myself in her at her age. For me, it shows up as overthinking, pressure, and self-doubt, overanalyzing situations, questioning myself, and expecting myself to be perfect. For her, it shows up as fear of judgment, fear of socialness, social anxiety, and full-blown avoidance. Instead of overthinking internally like I was, she was avoiding the situation that made her feel uncomfortable and unsure. But when I really looked at it, the root of both of our struggles was the same. We're both dealing with self-doubt. We're both worried about how others perceive us. We're both trying to protect ourselves from feeling uncomfortable or judged. The difference wasn't the struggle or the thoughts. The difference is how it showed up based on where we are in our stages of life. From a developmental perspective, this connects to how individuals at different stages face different challenges, but still share core emotional needs like confidence, belonging, and acceptance, as explained by Erickson. It also helped me realize that we grow. Our thinking becomes more complex. In my case, the complex thinking was what was leading to overthinking and overanalyzing, which is what Piaget says about cognitive development. This realization changed the way that I see development. It showed me that these challenges don't just go away, they evolve. I was just like her when I was her age, and it has changed through my different stages of life into what it is now. They evolve. They show up differently. Our age, our environment, our experiences, those all have a factor, but underlying emotions will always remain the same. Most importantly, it helped me understand that growth across the lifespan isn't about avoiding these challenges, I have been avoiding these challenges since I was her age, but it's about learning how to navigate them more effectively over time. The developmental theories that really helped me understand what was going on were Erik Erikson. His theory explains that at each stage of life, we are working through different psychosocial challenges. In early adulthood, we're focused on building relationships while trying to also maintain our sense of identity. This creates pressure, especially when we feel like we need to meet expectations in multiple roles. For my student, she was in the stage of industry versus inferiority, where confidence is built through success. She felt confident academically, but not socially, which led to self doubt in those situations. Piaget's theory helped me understand my own thinking. As adults, we are capable of more complex and abstract thinking. While that can be a strength, it can also lead to overthinking, overanalyzing, and focusing on worst case scenarios instead of what is actually happening in our real lives. Vygotsky's theory showed us how important it is to support in development. He emphasizes that learning happens through guidance before independence. My student did not lack ability. She needed structured support and practice before she could feel confident on her own. Bandura's theory helped explain how behavior is influenced by others. When I encouraged positive peer behavior, other students began modeling that, which then created a more supportive and inclusive environment for my student. These theories helped me realize that both my experience and my students' experience are part of normal development. They just show up differently depending on our stage of life and our emotions. Most importantly, they showed me that with the right support, awareness, and strategies, growth and change is always possible. It's important to remember that awareness is more powerful than perfection. You don't always have to be perfect, but you can be aware and make changes towards yourself. Growth happens when we step into discomfort. I have been ignoring my anxiety and my negative thoughts for my entire life. I did not want to deal with them. It was uncomfortable for me to talk about it. How do I expect to grow if I don't talk about it? Growth happens when we finally decide to step into discomfort. And of course, support is what builds confidence. Nothing can be achieved alone. Having a support system is just as important as anything else in your journey to self-growth. Reframing your thoughts. If you are needing strategies to help change your thoughts and pull back on the negativity, you can start by reframing. When you catch yourself thinking, what if this goes wrong? Try to shift that into something more balanced, like what's realistic here? What evidence do I have for this thought? You're not trying to be overly positive. You just need to try to be more accurate and fair in how you think. You also need to notice patterns. Pay attention to when your stress or negative thinking shows up for the most. Use a tally system like I did or a tick mark system to track what's really happening. For me, it was after long days. It would show up the most at home. Once you recognize these patterns, you can start preparing for those moments instead of being caught off guard. Pausing. Taking a few seconds to breathe or step back can make a huge difference. The pause gives you space to think and choose your response instead of reacting automatically. Taking small steps. Growth doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be immediate. It's okay. It can be something as simple as speaking up once, trying something new, or challenging a negative thought. Small steps build confidence over time. And lastly, give yourself grace. You're not going to get it right every time. That's okay. Being overly critical of yourself can make things worse. Instead, try to respond yourself with the same patience and understanding that you give others. We need to remember that we are not alone. So many people in this world are going through the anxiety and self-doubt that me and my student are also feeling. Changes are part of development. That doesn't mean you're failing. Growth takes time, and progress is happening even when you don't see it. Remember, small steps create growth. Progress is over perfection, and awareness leads to change. I want to leave you with one final thought. Take one small step forward. Not everything at once, just one little step. Growth starts with one choice. and that choice can start today. Thank you so much, and I hope you take your first step forward.